Good afternoon. This trail follows Barnhardt Canyon a good distance above the creek that's carved a lot of interesting waterways through that rock down there. And 'tis upon this stage where we set our tale today. Romeo and Juliet.
だ瞳の奥に
William Shakespeare's classic story of star-crossed lovers, Romeo and Juliet, has endured for over 400 years. It's inspired Italian opera, Russian ballet, Broadway musicals, Hollywood movies, traditional and modern, comedic takeoffs, comic books, manga, and countless community and high school theaters. I think it can survive Studio Gonzo's audacious anime adaptation too. You already know the plot outline. Two young lovers from rival families. The parents just don't get it. He dies, she dies, all are punished. In the fantasy anime reversioning, Neo Verona is an island that floats in the sky. Other than that and the flying horses, called dragon steeds, it's a very Elizabethan world of architecture, agriculture, and swords. Juliet is the last surviving heir to the House of Capulet. When she was only 2 years old, her parents and the rest of her family were slaughtered by the evil Prince Montague. That despot has plundered Neo Verona with an iron fist ever since. Juliet's few remaining family retainers have kept her hidden for many years, disguised as a boy using the name Odin. Now, as Juliet comes to her 16th birthday, she will learn the terrible truth of her bloody inheritance. Her loyal retainers hope that she will take up the family sword, restore the House of Capulet, exact revenge on the usurper, and liberate Neo Verona. But Juliet has already taken up the sword. Under her guise as Odin, and in a city filled with the depredations and injustices in the Montague's brutal reign, she's disguised herself as a masked liberator, the Red Whirlwind, to defend the oppressed. She's the Scarlet Pimpernel, or Zorro in pink. Imagine that her secret identity has a secret identity. Meanwhile, Romeo is Prince Montague's naive and distracted son, a kind, handsome lad who's oblivious to the suffering his father inflicts on the people. He has a couple of chance encounters with the Lady Juliet in her various guises. It's love at first sight, though neither initially knows just how absurd a love affair between the two of them is, because it's between a Capulet and a Montague, and not that they will care when they figure it out. They're so young, they're so beautiful, they're so in love.
Sorry, my lord.
I would have your name, if you please.
Why? Juliet.
Juliet. So beautiful. The name suits you well.
No, not a whit.
Tinkering with the Bard's original plot has consequences. In the original, Romeo and Juliet are just lovers from hated families, making a romance despite their family's objections and trying to escape their family's cycle of revenge killings. Verona's Prince Aeschylus is in charge of the city, and he tries to keep peace among the families. But here Aeschylus is just a sacred tree, known only to the royals. Since Juliet is head of the deposed Capulets, others who have labored for many years to keep her safe have placed their faith in her. They turn to her to lead her evolution. So she has to balance her love not against family disapprobation, but against the awesome responsibility of liberating the city from the cruel Montague tyranny. And a flighty, inconsistent job of it she does. She'll ultimately take up the Capulet sword and banner, and then renounce it for love, and repeat it several times. Okay, she's young, she's growing, she'll learn. Meanwhile, Romeo is slowly figuring out what a bitter, cruel bastard his old man is. Dad isn't just opposed to the romance, he wants Juliet de Capulet dead and her entire family snuffed out, and anyone who knows her for good measure. In the second half of the anime, Dad sends Romeo off to the countryside to cool off. There, Romeo spends some time running one of his dad's prison mines while he learns how to become a leader of men. There are plenty of other characters in both households, most with names lifted from Shakespeare's original play. The minor character, a playwright named Willie, is part of the story's cast, so he can comment wryly on the story as a work of art as it unfolds. It's a cuteness for mostly comic relief, but it pulls you out of the story. So, just don't expect Shakespeare's original love story. This has the added urgency of a revolution, and if that isn't enough for you, they'll toss in the fate of the entire country. Such freedom fighters. Amazingly, despite Juliet's swordplay and daring to win her red whirlwind guise, reminding me a little bit of Disney's old live-action black and white TV show Zorro that I watched as a kid, there are lots of flashing swords, but the red whirlwind never kills anyone. At least initially, it's the Montague's lackeys who do all the killing.
Who is this fool? No,
It's the red
it can't
whirlwind.
be. Seize him, men! Sir!
As I said, Romeo and Juliet is produced by Gonzo, and their animation generally works well here. The designs are traditional, clean and pleasant. There are a few places where the backgrounds show their CG origins by contrast with the character art, but it's only occasionally. The anime is directed by Kaleidostar's Fumitoshi Oisaki and written by Kaleidostar's Reiko Ishida. It's based loosely on a work by William Shakespeare. The story seems to show's greatest obstacle, at least as it's been modified. I can't tell if the revolution gets in the way of the love story or the love story gets in the way of the revolution, but the kids just aren't passionate enough to convince me that their love is so strong it will deny the whole world. At one point they run off alone to an abandoned village, marry themselves very solemnly in the ruins of a church, and move into a deserted cottage. Then what do? Juliet decides the place needs a good spring cleaning and sweeps and dusts until she falls asleep from exhaustion. Some honeymoon. Please, less coy blushing, more kissing, clinging, and hot-blooded passion. Convince me you two love each other. On the other hand, the anime did convince me of Juliet's passion for justice. She's a more convincing revolutionary than she is lover. She's the story's star and its most winsome character. Lastly, I didn't like the final plot point that concluded the tale. For a time, Yoshida was at risk of putting a happy ending on the bard's tragedy, so something needed to be done. But what he contrived didn't work for me at all. While the final act let the writer turn triumph back to tragedy and had adequate foreshadowing, it didn't come intrinsically from the main love story of the love-defying tradition, nor did it arise intrinsically from the revolution for Neo-Verona. It seemed tacked on. And in Romeo's case, it didn't make any sense at all to me. The music used an American love song for an action opening and an equally out-of-place raucous ending credit with some pretty nice interior music from Hitoshi Sakamoto in between that covered both the fights with excitement and the love story with some passion. Still, I would have gone with the Tchaikovsky myself. I'd like to devote more time than I usually do to Funimation's English dub. They tried something different here in honor of the source material, trying to incorporate some Shakespearean language into their English scripts. They didn't go whole hog for meter and rhyme, just some flowery prose. It almost works.
Sister, it's merely the plumage of some bird. A bird sporting such feathers would block out the very sun.
Funimation's head English writer, Taliesin Jaffe, even peppered the English dialogue with some phrases from the bard himself, and not just from Romeo and Juliet. They also tipped their hat to Julius Caesar, Hamlet, Richard III, As You Like It, and others. Plus I also caught some Arthur Conan Doyle, one old British author being as good as another, I suppose. But why not? It's not often they get a chance to dub an anime whose original source was in English. This idea, used with restraint, works more than it doesn't. But there are plenty of inconsistencies in it, and I think that's because they used half a dozen different staff writers throughout. I guess Funimation is so busy or in a hurry that they can't assign one writer to an entire show. That resulted in some indecision on how far to go towards Elizabethan English. Should it be nothing or naught? Shall it be why or wherefore? It depends on who was on duty at the writer's desk that day. I noticed one refrain that came up several times in the anime was an oracle's pronouncement that came out slightly different in English, different times. Apparently they didn't notice it was echoing. The nadir of inconsistent was probably this guy from New Jersey.
It ain't evening and we ain't open. And you ain't listening to me.
That's a line from the Bard's little-known play, Iphigenia in Brooklyn. I do want to acknowledge the fine work of the dubbed stars. Crispinette as Romeo, and especially Brina Polensky as Juliet. She needs to play a girl disguised as a boy pretending to be Zorro, a young girl coyly in love, and a young firebrand leader of a revolution, and she does it all pretty well. And on the whole, I thought the dub came off well. In the end, I give Romeo and Juliet 3.5 stars. It's a nicely made anime, and Juliet is a winsome character, but it was more convincing as a story of political revolution than as a love story. I'd rather watch the Zeffirelli movie version of the original, with Shakespeare in love for a chaser. Funimation has released all 24 episodes onto just 4 DVDs in 2 sets. The second DVD includes a 20-of making-of promo video featuring some of the Japanese creative staff. The final episode has a commentary track by some of the English dub staff. Thanks for watching!